Hey guys, what's going on? It's Dan here. I am joined with Hunter and Matt. How are you two doing today?
I'm doing good. Fun week this week.
What's going on, guys? How you doing?
Yeah, it definitely was a fun week. I am just getting back in town from a long weekend in Colorado, so I was catching up on all the matches today. A lot of interesting things happened this week, including over in the Red Division, where their most interesting thing of the season was Ryan singing a song about John while he played him. But with that being said, since it seems like Hunter forgot to fill in the subtitle here, we're just going to go ahead and dive straight into the battles this week. Alright, so we've got Jess versus Hunter first. Matt, why don't you break this one down for us?
Yeah, so not only did Hunter fail us on the subtitle there, but he also failed to pick up a win this week. So this game, I feel like it did go to 3 games. There was a lot going on, but I feel like it was rather straightforward. Particularly the first game. I mean, it was the first game was just a little bit weird because at first you see Hunter, like it seemed like he just kind of fell into the classic multi-scale weakness policy trap by going for the Wormwind on the Dragonite. But then on that same turn he gets frozen on his Max Kingdra, which is rather strange and really does dictate the flow of the rest of the match. It's always weird when a big piece of RNG happens like this so soon in a match. It's a little bit easier to determine whether or not this kind of thing matters when it happens in the late game, because so much of the game has already been played. There's a lot less variance because maybe there's only 1 or 2 turns left, and you can kind of tell the players on the field only have like 1 or 2 options each as far as how they play their end games. But here it's just so strange when it happens so early, because there are so many different ways the game could have gone. There was so much game left to be played. I mean, it was turn 1 and Kingdra still had like two turns sitting on the field where it could have fired off max moves where it was just frozen. So that was pretty rough. I think without the freeze, it was really just anyone's game, because we just have no idea how it would play out, because there's so much left that we didn't get to see if the freeze hadn't happened. So Jess took game 1 pretty handily. Game 2, I was actually I was impressed with the way that Hunter played, particularly in the early game 2. At first turn protecting Kingdra and going for the Ice Beam with Politoed to break the multi-scale, break the disguise, make sure that that the Dragonite was staying slower, and protecting the Kingdra at the same time. I think you probably could have gotten away with just a protect instead of a max guard, but I don't think it's a huge deal. And then afterward, knowing that the the Dragonite was going to max guard, and then going for a Geyser into the Mimikyu slot, also just in case that Vanillix switched in, which it did, because that would have been rather dangerous if it was able to get a free switch. And I believe you also switched the Politoed out to Thunderous that turn for some extra speed control there. So I really like Hunter's play there. He did an excellent job kind of counterplaying the good prep that I think Jess brought. And then his switch to Snorlax from the Metagross at the end, along with Jess setting Trick Room with the Mimikyu a little bit later, really saved Hunter there. So before we move on to Game 3, I actually want to ask Hunter. I'm curious why the switch from Metagross to Snorlax in Game 2.
I just really wanted to preserve my Metagross. I felt like I could beat what was on the field, and I know that I had some bulk in my Metagross, and it was actually for the matchup one-on-one with Mimikyu if it had its disguise. And if I'm not mistaken, I think its disguise was broken when I swapped out. I think I could be wrong, or I was breaking it that turn. And I felt confident switching it out for the Mimikyu matchup. So it was And you know what? There's actually a different detail that I actually kind of want to keep under wraps a little bit. But that's basically it. It was basically just for the Mimikyu matchup.
Gotcha.
Late
And what was the Snorlax for? Because you brought Metagross in game 1, and then switched that slot from the Metagross to the Snorlax in game 2. What was the thought process behind that?
Yeah. So okay. So looking at the matchup, the rain mode seemed pretty I guess a pretty obvious bring for me. Like her main options kind of fold to it a little bit. Like if you look at Dragonite, Landorus, um, I think Stakataka as well. And then also the Politoed also helps cancel out her Hail mode, which has been actually a pretty underrated and big part of her season, I think. So I expected a couple of those bigger threats weak to Rain and on top of the Hail mode. And I also actually expected the Slowbro, excuse me, because it's a pretty solid switch in to the Rain mode. And I thought my Mons, I thought it had a good matchup. So what happened was I realized that late game, even though after I got that freeze, the unfortunate freeze on the Kingdra, I was playing for differential, and I realized that in that situation, I would have had a better chance of winning, um, versus the Arctozolt, with the Snorlax because I actually was thick fat. I wasn't gluttony, I had the citrus berry on my pace. Sorry, I didn't get an upload this week, but I was belly drum citrus berry instead of belly drum like Iapapa or Figgy or something like that, and I had thick fat just exactly for that ice mode matchup. Um, so I figured that if she brought the same Mons, which I mean she won pretty handily in game 1, so I figured like I'm down 0-1, I have nothing to lose. Like let's just switch to the Snorlax for the better matchup versus the Hail mode, and it ended up working out. So yeah, much up.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Yeah, I like the thick fat tech. That's
Yeah.
it's a good decision.
Thank you.
And then game 3, you ended up activating the Dragonite's weakness policy again. This time with a Max Hailstorm, which was a little bit awkward because you're getting rid of your own rain, but the Vanillux came in pretty soon after that, so that part didn't really matter quite as much. But activating the weakness policy and letting the Dragonite get a max airstream up was a little bit rough. She was able to position herself with the Dragonite and the Scarf Vanillux coming in after her Slowbro went down, and the Scary Face was on the Thunderous was a good bring. It was just going to be really difficult for that to address the super fast Dragonite and also the Scarf Vanillux at the same time. So that combination was kind of able to just run through a lot of the rest of your team. I was a little disappointed not to see a Rain Dance on Thunderous here. Mostly because it could have, I think it could have saved you in that particular situation, or at least it would have allowed Kingdra to get another max move off before going down. And I feel like it would have been a good bring in this particular matchup since you're going up against opposing weather. That was actually one of the techs that I really liked when you picked up the Thunderous, that I didn't really want to reveal quite yet, but I thought it was probably would have been a good bring here. But you also had a couple other techs for some other things that she had. So anyway, that does it for game 3. Kind of just a Dragonite sweep from there. As you can see from on the slide here, Dragonite ended up getting quite a few kills. It was a very good max option from Jess. Seemed pretty difficult for Hunter to deal with. She maxed it in all 3 games. Overall, I feel like Jess just sort of won on prep here, and Hunter, I felt like you had to get your counterplay exactly right in order to win this one. I think there were some places where you did, but it was sort of an uphill battle given the matchup and given the way that she prepped. And it's pretty tough to be able to play perfectly like that really consistently the whole way through the set. So in terms of prep, I think, and game plan, I think she probably had the upper hand. Dan, what do you think about this one?
I thought this was a pretty interesting matchup. This was one of the few matches where 11 of the 12 Pokemon hit the field. I don't recall the Landorus hitting the field watching it from her side, but that was a little while ago. But I thought it was pretty well played overall. I do think that Snorlax switch into Game 2 was really solid on your end, Hunter. But I did see like the multi-scale Dragonite ended up being more of a problem than you probably initially thought in prep, because, you know, who brings a Dragonite into a matchup against a Kingdra that's almost assuredly attacking Ice Beam, you know what I mean? But I think she was able to position it really well to punish sort of odd attacks into it, and then was able to use it, was able to leverage the power that Dragonite inherently has to really ride an advantage in this matchup. And I know this matchup was also very important when it came to seeding for our division, which we're going to be talking about a little bit later. So I thought this was played pretty well on both of your parts, and definitely befitting of a solid leadoff matchup this week.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, but with that being said, Hunter, why don't you take Charles versus Dina?
Yeah, sure. So again, this is another big match for playoff implications. We had a couple of those this week. So you know, I mean, I thought this game was really interesting, and there's a couple reasons why, and I'll kind of explain as I go through the match. So game one, Charles leads the Aromatisse Corviknight, and Dina leads the Articuno Clefable, if I'm not mistaken. So the main two things I'm seeing here are probably, they both try to go for their own speed control, right? The Aromatisse with Trick Room, and then the Tailwind with Articuno. But the issue is Tailwind wins that every time, or I'm sorry, Trick Room wins that every time. And then you know, Charles gets his Trick Room up, and this is something that I really want to give credit to Charles to, and I've been giving credit to Charles for this all season. His prep and his thought process are very high level, and I'll tell you why here in a second. If you saw the match, you understand what I'm talking about. But he what he does is he knows that he's almost guaranteed Trick Room with Aromatisse, right? Because like you can double into the Aromatisse all you want, unless you're scoring some crits or you have some techs for super effective moves. You're getting Trick Room up. That thing's bulky, and Articuno puts on a little bit of offense. If you're going to be running Follow Me Clefable, you're not going to have that much offense, so I understand where he's coming from on that. But he gets Trick Room up, and he U-turns with Corviknight to get his Mudsdale in. And this is a reoccurring thing throughout the set. He positions his Mudsdale with U-turn. I think he's done this with Liepard too. I think it was against Dan, actually. He positioned with the Mudsdale and Eldegoss with the U-turn on the Liepard, I think, that time. So he's using these initiative moves in VGC very well, and that's not something you see a lot. So I just really want to give that to Charles, that credit to Charles. So Dina gets up the light screen and damage on the Aromatisse for a Trick Room here. So I mean, that's a little bit of an advantage for Charles, considering he's got the Mudsdale in. Unfortunately, when Gastrodon comes in and you know, and kind of surfs for the weakness policy on Mudsdale, he kind of crits his own Mudsdale. A little bit unfortunate there, but Mudsdale basically did what it wanted to until it was done with its max. But he did reveal a very important piece of information on Dina's side, and that's actually that she was running Babiri and not the Mental Herb. And so I'll talk about that a little bit later. And takes out the Articuno, you know, pretty much simultaneously. So the only issue is Dina had the Rotom Wash in the back with Cinderace. So I think she realized that as long as Gastrodon goes down, Rotom wins versus Mudsdale and Corviknight, right? So assuming that he doesn't have Rock Slide or something like that on the Mudsdale. So you know, Dina, you know, as the Articuno and Clefable go down, Dina then maxes the Rotom Wash and times it when Mudsdale's max is finished, and tries to work around the Storm Drain, and does so with a couple of max Darknesses, which is really great prep on her part. I don't know if it was a specific tech for something else, maybe, but it was a good way to hit the Latias, which I noticed, and also to work around the Storm Drain, which is kind of a situational thing, but I think it was more for Latias. So it was overall just a great play on her part. They trade turns of attacking back and forth, and eventually Cinderace hits the Corviknight with the Pyro Ball when Trick Room is over, and reveals the Aqua Berry, which is another great piece of information going on. throughout the set. And then the Rotom finishes off the Gastrodon with its last turn of Max and basically seals game 1 for Dina. So there's a lot of information battle going on in game 1. So game 2, the same leads from both players. So Charles leads the Aromatisse Corviknight, and the Articuno and Clefable come out for Dina. Except Charles makes a great adjustment and uses he teched the taunt on the Corviknight, and since he knows that Dina's carrying the Babiri Berry instead of the Mental Herb, he protects with the Aromatisse, assuming that the Freezing Glare would come towards the Aromatisse like it did in game 1, and potentially to try and get some damage or trying to deny Trick Room or something like that. He was just playing safe, and he knew that he had the guaranteed taunt on the Clefable, again, since there was no Mental Herb. So Dina is now forced to switch out the Clefable, right? And Charles makes a really solid play. Knowing that she has to switch out the Clefable, he goes for the Trick Room with Aromatisse and U-turns with Corviknight, knowing that he only has the Articuno to worry about, or else, he's most of the time, you're getting the struggle with Clefable, right? Especially since a lot of the time don't run damaging moves. And it just so happened that Dina was not running a single damaging move, so Taunt pretty much rendered it useless. So she was forced to switch it out, and he goes for the same play that he went for in game 1 with the U-turn, brought in the Mudsdale. This time, it's against Cinderace Articuno, and I think it was Cinderace Articuno, and then the Mudsdale Aromatisse, right? So now Charles has the Mudsdale in under Trick Room, ready to go off again, and instead of the Surf from Gastrodon, he self-targets with the Energy Ball from Aromatisse, and gets the Weakness Policy boost, and takes out the Articuno when the Clef comes right back in for the Cinderace. So now Dina is she's pretty stuck, I think. She either comes in with the Rotom and maxes next to Clef, or Cinderace and maxes, and she ends up going with the Rotom and maxes it, but once the Aromatisse goes into Gastrodon and absorbs the potential Geyser, Dina makes a really solid play and Max Darknesses the Aromatisse, probably expecting the Gastrodon. Going up against Charles, you really have to work around these Storm Drains and Lightning Rods and stuff. So credit to Charles for that one again. There's not much really Dina can do at this point, especially when Dina followed me with the Clefable and a nice tech on Charles's part, packing the Sludge Bomb for the probably for the Clefable, maybe some other things, I'm not really sure, but it's a nice tech, just to hit the Clefable a little harder, and uses it with the Room Service on the Gastrodon. It's actually faster than Mudsdale under Trick Room, so it KOs the Clefable and Mudsdale hits the Rotom with a +2 Max Darkness, which is great damage considering it did half to a Dynamax Rotom. So the next turn, Charles KOs the Rotom with a combination of Energy Ball from the Aromatisse that's switching in and the Lash Out from the Mudsdale, and takes game 2 with a pretty high level adjustment, I think. And all credit to him, and that's not discrediting Dina. She had a great game plan going into it. Speaking of great game plans, let's go into game 3. So same lead from Charles, but Dina actually adjusts to that and leads the Cinderace Clefable and fires a G-Max move into the Aromatisse, but Charles plays it safe and did the same thing he did the game before, and protects with the Aromatisse, and then Charles taunts the Clefable again, and kind of just gets the same momentum he had with game 2, except now he's in position to try and stall out the turns of Dynamax with the Cinderace. And even with the Cinderace staring him down against Corviknight Aromatisse, I think that Charles is in a pretty good spot, considering that if he can stall out the Dynamax, then he can just come in with the Mudsdale thing again and just kind of be in an even better spot than he was before. So turn 2, Dina fireballs into the Aromatisse slot, and it lives with the Reflect Up that he actually teched on the Corviknight from the turn before. So another really cool tech. And Charles taunts the Clefable the next turn, and is immediately in big control of this game. It's I just can't overstate the fact that it's just really unfortunate that Charles found out that she was Babiri Berry and not Mental Herb. And it was also kind of unfortunate that she didn't tech the Mental Herb. I think it would have been cool here, but at the same time, I felt like the Babiri Berry tech on the Clefable really helped Dina win game one because it was one Dynamax move that she took that's doing the same damage as Max Quake, at least relatively, I think. Maybe there's a 10% difference, but as you can see in later games, the Clefable has taken at least one Max Quake, and it took one Steel Spike, and it wouldn't have without the Babiri. So it helped her and pulled her down a little bit, but that's okay. So then Charles does the good old U-turn Trick Room thing like he's done the whole series, and gets Trick Room up and Mudsdale right next to the Aromatisse, perfectly timed with Cinderace's Dynamax ending. And then Dina makes a super interesting play in my opinion, and double switches the Rotom Cinderace into the Articuno Clefable, excuse me. While Charles goes for the Energy Ball weakness policy thingy, and Max Darkness is into the Rotom slot, which was swapped into the Articuno, and that pretty much goes down. I don't really know what her thought process was. I didn't really get any insight on that, but I mean, it was a good sack to preserve the Rotom and Cinderace, which are obviously her two main offensive options. So then Charles switches into the Gastrodon, expecting a Hydro Pump from the Rotom that just came in, and Dina reads the possible Gastrodon switch in again, and Dark Pulses the Mudsdale. It's a good read, but the issue is that it's not doing anything to a Dynamax Mudsdale at this point in the game. So the turn before Trick Room expires, Dina switches in the Cinderace and Follow Me's with the Clefable, and Charles just Sludge Bombs the Clef, and Max Darkness is the Rotom slot like we saw in game 2, I think, and takes out both Clef and incoming Cinderace in a huge turn for Charles, pretty much won him the game. And it was just Rotom against the world, basically. I mean, Rotom did a lot of damage, picked up a KO, but it wasn't enough to 1v3. So the main takeaway I took away from this game is, like I said, the mental herb thing, but it was also the fact that both players adjusted incredibly this game, but I think Charles took it a step further and really played around the information he had, which was that there was no mental herb in the Clefable, and losing the redirection with mons like Rotom and Cinderace, I mean that's kind of big. Not to mention rendering one of Dina's better mons almost useless. I mean, it's pretty much just a meat shield at that point, struggling. So you have to kind of play around it. It's pretty obvious when you're going to switch after a taunt with no mental herb. So that's pretty much it for that. Dan, what did you think about this game?
So I thought it was pretty interesting. Just the TLDR for people that might just be skipping ahead in the video a bit. Mudsdale goes brrr, and that's basically
Yeah.
what the set was. I did think the play with Rotom with the darkness around the Gastrodon, I thought it was very impressive with both of them. The consistency of the reads with the Gastrodon switches and the Rotom attacks, I thought that was pretty well. But if I did have one critique for Dina just basically thus far this season, is I thought the Articuno transaction was, and I still do think that it is the single best transaction that's occurred this season so far, but it's really underwhelmed me so far on her team. I don't know exactly what it is with the way she's playing, but I'm just underwhelmed whenever I see the Articuno in any of her games, and I don't know if that's a her thing, I don't know if it's an it thing, I don't know if it's a combo of both, if it just doesn't fit her style correctly, but it's currently at a 1-6 season-long KD, and it feels like it should be up there with the Rotom and the Cinderace in terms of offensive options. That's just a quick tangential note that I had. But otherwise, you're right. I thought the way that information was gathered early in the set and then played around late in the set was very key for both of them. And I thought this was a pretty good example of a high-level set and with solid reads coming out from both ends. But Matt, what have your thoughts been on this set?
Well, I'll piggyback a little bit on your Articuno comments a little bit. I agree it hasn't been probably as good as it could be. I do think that, in this set at least, I wasn't really a fan of the Clefable Articuno lead, because I think this is... People have probably heard me talk about justifying something like a high-tier redirector before. I don't think this kind of lead really does that. because there just wasn't enough. There wasn't enough offense or coverage coming out of the Articuno, and again, coverage is something that it's hurting for. So that's, I can't you can't fault the player when the Pokemon just doesn't have those tools. But I didn't really care for it as a lead, because the Articuno wasn't doing enough, and Clefable was while Clefable was basically sacking itself with Follow Me stuff. But other than that, well, also I do think that the Dina has some ways of kind of activating the Articuno and bringing out its potential, and I do think it has been pretty effective for her a couple of times as a Tailwind setter. I just don't think that she's really using those tools quite enough. I know that I think in her matchup against you, Dan, she did have she had the Articuno next to a Max Cinderace with Max Darkness and Max Ooze, and also Max Airstream, I think, and that's a great combination to have. Those Max moves are a great combination to have next to the Galarian Articuno. I think that's an example of when she was using it correctly. It just didn't exactly pan out there because of your gameplay as well. But she has the tools to unlock this thing's potential, and I haven't seen her use them all that much. Regarding the Clefable, as to the Babiri Berry Mental Herb debate, I think that this particular match is a really difficult one to get right in terms of which one of those items you want. I think Clefable's caught between the two of those a lot within this division because there are so many big steel types at the top of people's drafts, like this Heatran, for example. And I think if she had gone with the Mental Herb and Charles had been using this Heatran mode instead, I think there's a very good chance we could be saying the same thing about, well, attack the Babiri Berry instead of the Mental Herb because the Heatran just went in. So yeah. It's tough to it's a difficult guessing game, really.
Right.
But I think the main critique I have for Dina is that she didn't really make use of her Trick Room mode here. Obviously, it never actually hit the field. I think it would have been a really good option to help deal with the Mudsdale mode a little bit better, because even with the room service on the Gastrodon, your Escavalier is still going to be slower. And I believe we saw room service on the Runerigus as well, right? So your Trick Room mode is still going to be the slowest thing on the field. You can max your Escavalier for Steel Spike boosts, so the boosted Mudsdale is not quite as threatening. I don't know whether she had an Iron Defense set on the Runerigus, but if she did, that also would have been a really great bring. So I think that's one thing I would have liked to see in her adjustments. We've seen her adjust very well in other matchups. This is one of those times where I think she could have done a better job at it. As far as Charles goes, I really have to commend Charles for this mode that he created here. Just starting off with the Aromatisse and Corviknight up front. The Corviknight was a really great tool to help the entire mode get moving. Usually you like to see something like a Fake Out user or a Follow Me user next to your Trick Room setter. Corviknight wasn't really there to help Trick Room go up as much. It did have the Reflect, which helped in Game 3, but it was more just about setting up the mode to function correctly. It had the Taunt to make sure that Clefable couldn't Follow Me after getting the Mudsdale into the Corviknight slot, so you can safely Energy Ball yourself. It had a slow U-turn, which works quite a bit better than the Liepard's U-turn, because you're able to get a much safer switch, and your opponent's Pokemon are moving more often before you do, so you can get your switch in on the field without being quite so worried about taking an attack in that slot. And then overall, I love the mode, especially with the Gastrodon and the Mudsdale. At first, I was kind of confused as to why the room service was on the Gastrodon, because I don't think you're able to underspeed a Escavalier with room service. But it was definitely worth it just to be slower than the Mudsdale, not only because you're hitting it with the Surf to activate weakness policy, but you also know that with the Unaware on Clefable, if Clefable's positioned well enough to be redirecting stuff from Mudsdale, you know that with the Unaware, your Mudsdale is not going to be able to one-shot that thing, so you can get it down pretty low, and then use the Sludge Bomb from Gaster on the following turn to kill the Clefable, so that the Mudsdale's +2 attack can get redirected into the non-Clefable slot. I think that was absolutely fucking fantastic, and I love it. So, props to Charles for that. That was amazing.
Well, fantastic. With that being said, I wasn't sure if that's how he was ending that. I was giving him a second to breathe.
Yeah, sorry, that was it.
All right, with that being said, let's look at the last matchup of the week, where we had Toxic against Matt. So, this matchup was pretty interesting. Matt consistently went with Scarf Regidrago in the back as a cleaner. It sort of bit him in game 2 when Toxic was able to have a 1 HP Carbink left against just Scarf Regidrago, and just break it down with some body presses. Matt even considered running from the battle, but then decided to be a good person and not do that. So props to Matt for that. But I think
I will say I didn't know how much the body press was going to do. I realized this was a long shot, but I only kept clicking Dragon Energy because I figured maybe if the body press does a small enough amount of damage, I could struggle and kill it. But otherwise, I would have just clicked the forfeit button because it's obvious what gets the kill there.
Interesting.
Go on. Sorry.
Okay. But Toxic had a pretty consistent plan too. He wanted to max Blastoise and get the cannonades rolling pretty early in the game, which ended up doing a decent amount of damage for him. When I first watched the match and I saw the Blastoise maxing consistently turn 1, I wasn't a huge fan, but it turned out to do a decent amount of damage each time, and it sort of grew on me. I think game 1 really came down to one key turn where I believe Togedemaru was next to Serena, and he protected Serena and switched the Togedemaru out into a Dragalge, knowing that Celesteela had a ground type attack. And in that situation, I don't know, that just felt like a bad play on that one turn, because you know if Celesteela is targeting into that slot, it's going to be with the ground type attack to hit the Togedemaru, and that just picked up the KO on the Dragalge and sort of slammed the door on game 1 in what was otherwise a very solid game for Toxic. He did end up picking up game 2, like I said, with that Carbink play. And then game 3, we had the weird Ludicolo set against a very specially based team, the Amnesia Ludicolo, with Ice Beam as the only attack. And Leech Seed. It seemed to do pretty well into Toxic's team. Like, I will absolutely give it that. But I don't know. Something about that whole game made me think that you were just leaving the door open for Toxic, because I think he played very well in this match, except for that one turn in game 1, and he had some opportunities in game 3 to come back and take this match. Overall, I think the Blastoise play was really good. I think the Carbink play was really good. The Dragalge play, the one turn it hit the field, was very substandard, but Toxic played very well. Matt, on your side, I was not sold on Regidrago as a sweeper in the back against a team that had 2 fairy types, but it did clean up 2 different games, so it went well enough that I think you proved me wrong on that one, because Regidrago in the back, just, I don't know, for some reason that doesn't sound good to me, but you made it come in and perform its sweeper role very well after Celesteela softened the team. Your Mamoswine play was honestly a little suspect this week, I think. Both the targeting and just bringing it seemed a little off each game. I'm not sure exactly what it was, because it has a decent matchup into this team, but it never really seemed to get the ball rolling and just seemed to be there to soak up attacks for the most part. But overall, this was a very interesting week, and although Toxic lost -5, I think he performed better than that score shows. But Hunter, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, you pretty much covered everything. I was actually going to say that I actually really like the Mammoth here. It's just unfortunate that I couldn't really do very much. And also, I'm just glad, somebody else caught the wrath of Reggie Drago a little bit, so I'm not the only one. Okay, listen. I mean, I've been the only one for the last few weeks now. Okay, I've been memed about it. I'm just glad somebody else, understands what I'm talking about. So, yeah, Reggie Drago.
You were never going to be the only one.
Yeah, Reggie Drago's super cool. I'm actually gonna piggyback on what Dan said a little bit. Bringing Reggie Drago against two fairies. Obviously, you didn't know he was gonna bring the two fairies, but he ended up doing it. I just want to say, Matt, I really gotta commend you. You have some balls bringing that thing against two fairy types. I just want to say that. So yeah, good stuff, dude. Good stuff.
Well, I'll touch on a few of my mons here since they were brought up here. First of all, the Mamoswine, I definitely agree. There were points at which my usage of it was not great. I will defend its place in this matchup, but yeah, I made some mistakes with it for sure.
Oh no! This is absolutely a you thing, not an it thing.
Yes, okay. I agree. As mean as that sounds, I agree. Yeah, there was one point in game 1 where it was going down to the hydro cannon damage at the end of the turn, and I protected it anyway. I wasn't paying enough attention to exactly how much damage it was taking, and I think it recovered some HP off of grassy terrain, so I thought there might have been a chance it would survive, but and I also realized that it was not even getting faked out that turn. I think that the Toad ended up faking out the other slot, so I could have just freely attacked with the Mamoswine there. That was not good. The turn where I timed out in game 2 was kind of heartbreaking because I realized what the right play was, just 2 or 3 seconds too late, and I had to backtrack and go switch my Celesteela, and then I tried to attack with the Mamoswine and I timed out and protected instead. That was rough. So yeah, there were some things that Mamoswine could have done better here for sure. The Reggie Drago in the back, I specifically brought it in the back. It was actually one of my lead options, but then when I saw that there was no Dragapult, that went completely out the window. I brought it specifically in the back as a cleanup mon with the Scarf because I thought if either of these two fairy types are coming, they're coming in the front. I thought it was either going to be Clefairy Blastoise or Carbink next to Dragalge, or maybe even Carbink Clefairy just for Follow Me Trick Room, because the Dragalge was there, so I figured this was kind of a Trick Room mode. But I figured one or both of them would have to come in the front. Celesteela can deal with them pretty easily, and then Reggie Drago can clean up other stuff later on in the game. So that was my thought process there. I think I probably brought it one game too many times, but especially because he ended up bringing both of his fairy types in game 3. So yeah, he definitely prepped hard for Reggie Drago, harder than I really expected. I definitely expected the Clefairy to be here, but in prep I was not really thinking too much about Carbink, but it turned out to be a good bring here. And lastly, the Ludicolo, that thing I will defend to the death. That thing was not ever going to die, especially in the position that I had it in. I didn't even really care if everything else around it died. It was perfectly capable of just bulking it out the rest of the game, and just stalling with Leech Seeds. And even if Serena was on the field, that's what the Ice Beam was for. So I get that you kind of said that I was leaving the door open for Toxic to take over a little bit, but there was no killing the Ludicolo at that point, even if it was by itself and Carbink got to +6 defense. this Ludicolo was max HP, max defense, and it had 2 steel spike boosts. So I don't think it was dying at all, especially with Leech Seed leftovers. So I honestly I regret not bringing it in game 2, frankly. So yeah, Ludicolo I think was excellent here because he was relying so much on the Blastoise, and Ludicolo was specifically designed to deal with a Blastoise game plan. It was more designed to deal with Shell Smash Blastoise, which I'm a little surprised was not actually here this time, but does just fine against this other Life Orb Blastoise as well. So Ludicolo I think was an excellent bring here, especially with this set that I had.
Yeah, I think overall this was a very interesting match, and I do agree that Ludicolo's set was quite good this week. But with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the standings through 6 weeks. So, looking at the standings, we've got a top 8 that are very close right now, and then another the bottom 6 right now are all really fighting for those 2 wildcard spots and the potential to move up even further into the divisions as well. Like, this is a lot of parity through 6 weeks of a season, but what are your guys' thoughts on the standings?
Well, I'll go first. I think I don't really want to sound condescending here. That's not my intention at all. But I think that after these last few weeks, I think we touched on it a couple weeks ago on how the standings weren't really where we thought they were going to be. I think it's getting a little bit better now, and specifically one player, and that's actually Jess. And I don't know, maybe I may just be a little biased after I just played her, but I mean she won season 1. She's a hell of a player, and she was towards the bottom for a lot of the seasons, not seasons. I'm sorry. A lot of these weeks, specifically in the blue division. I mean, the blue division is super competitive, and I'm not saying the red division isn't, but I mean, Matt, Dan, Charles, Dina, Jess, like that is just ridiculous. I mean, you got 2 champions in there, and then you got Dan, Charles, and Dina, who are all totally capable of winning the championship this season. Okay, I just think that I think Jess is going to start picking up a couple wins here and there. And I have no doubt that she'll be in a good spot to make for playoffs. And I just want to shout out Burst again for picking up another win. I'm telling you guys, the redemption arc is coming. Okay, it's coming. Just got to shout out Burst. Matt, what do you think about standings?
I'm surprised at how much of a bloodbath this is in the middle here. I mean, we have 6 different teams at 3-2 right now, and if the standings stay roughly the same, then this is kind of what our playoff brackets are looking like, and it's going to be sort of difficult for some of these bottom teams to climb their way up when with so many teams with good records. I mean, if you go, I guess the top 8 actually have positive records instead of so that's kind of half and half, but it's getting real tough. I definitely did not expect to see 6 players with a 3-2 record at this point. At this point there's 6. So there's going to be a really tough fight for those slots to make it into top 8, to get the buy into top 8, and there's also going to be some fighting near the bottom to get into that 5th seed. So this is going to be really interesting. It's not exactly clear who's going to be in what slot yet. Of course, we still have 4 more weeks to play, but it is clear who's going to have a more difficult time, who's going to have a more uphill battle to get into those slots that they want, and who's going to have maybe a little bit more safety, a bit of a cushion, even if they drop a game here or there. At least, like for the 3-2s, at least you'll be pretty safe to at least get into one of the wild card games, unless something goes catastrophically wrong. But it's going to be very interesting to see who falls where.
Yeah, and speaking for the Blue Division, since that's the one we're all in, I know this coming week there are some very key matchups. Charles versus Jess, for example, is going to
Ooh,
have big implications on wildcard
absolutely.
versus top three potentially. Dina versus Matt, to a bit lesser extent, but for Dina, it's definitely an important match. And then Hunter, you're playing some guy named Dan to not fall to 1-5. So
Yeah.
these are all really big matches this week, and there are some other ones in the red division as well, but they're less important. Uh, but yeah, I think we've been having a pretty good season so far. Do you guys have any closing thoughts before I wrap it up?
No, very fun week to watch and play in. And yeah, what about you, Matt?
Just good luck to everybody going into this final week. You got final week of in division games. That is, we do have our final transaction happening after this week. So, if you're gonna make a trade, make sure you get it right because you can't undo it for a good few weeks. Yeah, that's about it. Good luck to everybody.
All right. Well, on behalf of Matt and Hunter, this was Dan. We are your Blue Division coaches, and we will see you next week for our last Blue Division only show. Goodbye.